Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu just lambasted new Foreign Minister Yair Lapid for capitulating to the Biden administration, publicly telling Secretary of State Blinken that Israel would not do anything to Iran without first telling America. But Netanyahu calling out Lapid's dangerous foreign policy change is not the real story here. First, let's listen to what former Prime Minister Netanyahu just said.
Last Thursday, Israel's alternate Prime Minister, Yair Lapid, made an astounding commitment to U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Lapid promised Blinken that Israel would not surprise the United States on matters relating to Iran's nuclear program. That's the program designed to produce nuclear weapons to annihilate the state of Israel. If Prime Minister Begin had followed such a commitment, we would not have destroyed Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor. I myself had been asked by the United States many times to give such a commitment. Now, mind you, there is no greater ally and no greater friend that Israel has like the United States. But when it comes to matters of our security, our very survival, I always reserve the right to act on our own without informing our American friends. There were times that I did tell them of impending actions. There were many other times that I didn't. And yet, it took the Lapid-Bennett government 3 days to undermine this important and critical tenet in our national security. And that's why this government is so dangerous to our future. That's also why we'll bring them down a lot faster than you think.
Folks, as you know, social media censorship is growing. The best way to support our video work for Israel is to subscribe to our video newsletter on pulseofisrael.com and to share our videos. If you are already a subscriber, then thank you. As I said before, the true story here is not Lapid's horrendous capitulation to the Biden administration that can endanger Israel. No. It's about the hypocrisy of the establishment media and the official Israeli world of diplomacy. This is a double challenge that Netanyahu was fighting against for years as Prime Minister. New Prime Minister Naftali Bennett is very familiar with this reality in Israel, but it seems he's preferred to capitulate to these powers of the left in Israel instead of going around them, like Netanyahu tried his best to do, not always successfully. Let's put this into context with an example to better understand. Using Iran. Back in the year 2015, Netanyahu dared give a speech before both houses of Congress in Washington, D.C., calling upon the American government not to approve Obama's horrific nuclear deal with Iran. This was done, obviously, while Obama was still president. Obama was fuming that Netanyahu would dare publicly speak to the American public against his key foreign policy accomplishment, the Iran nuclear deal, which was capitulating to the worst state sponsor of terror in the world, Iran. At the time, the state of Israel and Israelis should have been exceptionally proud that their leader, Netanyahu, was willing to do everything necessary, including standing up to the most powerful politician in the world, President Obama, in order to protect Israel. Yet only Israelis not brainwashed by the establishment media felt that pride in Netanyahu at the time. Current Foreign Minister Yair Lapid back then was in the opposition, and together with Israel's establishment media and many experienced Israeli diplomats, they attacked Netanyahu then for deciding to make that speech in the U.S. Congress on the basis that he was endangering Israel's relationship with the United States of America. Of course, Netanyahu knows the United States, knows its politics, he knew what he was doing. One can agree or disagree with that assessment, but Netanyahu has always acted upon the premise that a nuclear Iran is an existential threat to Israel, hence he will do everything necessary to protect Israel. Israel must only rely on herself. U.S. administrations come and go. Some are supportive, like President Trump, and some are dangerous, like President Obama was. But when push comes to shove, the only ones we can rely on to protect Israel from existential threats is ourselves. Now, love Netanyahu or hate Netanyahu, he knows how to stand up to world pressure using diplomacy in order to protect Israel, while Lapid and other experienced Israeli diplomats and Israel's establishment media prefer to castigate Netanyahu no matter what he does, while they celebrate the dangerous diplomacy of the left. Think about this. When Obama was president, Israel's media and establishment diplomats always castigated Netanyahu for not giving in to Obama's demands regarding the two-state solution, settlement freeze, etc., because Netanyahu was harming relations with the United States. Yet when President Trump was president, they hated Trump's deal of the century and did everything they could to torpedo the implementation of Trump's deal of the century. Yet they never said that that would harm relations with the United States. You see, it's never about reality or facts or justice. It's all about ideology, and an ideology of the establishment media and experienced diplomats. This is why Netanyahu always tried to run foreign policy from the Prime Minister's office. He knew he could not rely on the official diplomats in the foreign ministry, and he definitely couldn't rely on Israel's establishment media for coverage, positive coverage of his diplomatic moves. Now we fast forward to today, with Yair Lapid as foreign minister, endangering Israel by capitulating to the Biden administration and promising not to do anything to Iran without first telling the Biden administration. Well, what about right-winger Naftali Bennett, who's prime minister? Well, again, a prime minister in Israel's coalition political system only has as much power as he is able to wield over his coalition. People always complain, and many right-wingers always complain about the right-wing policies that Netanyahu was not able to accomplish or didn't implement when he was prime minister. And much had to do with the fact that many of the key ministries were under the control of other parties. Sometimes he even gave the important foreign ministry and justice ministry, most of the time, to left-wing parties. Why? Because that was part of Netanyahu's strategy to have a stable government and a government that appears centrist with left-wingers while he was a more hawkish prime minister. The price was not having the ability to always have control over policy. And that was for a prime minister who had a party with 30 to 40 seats in the coalition of 60 plus. Now, Naftali Bennett's party only has 6 seats in a coalition of 61. While I'm sure Bennett would prefer a diplomatic strategy similar to Netanyahu, in reality, he has little actual control over what Lapid does as foreign minister or Benny Gantz does as defense minister. Both of those people prefer capitulating to the Biden administration instead of standing up for Israel's right to do what is necessary to stop Iran from going nuclear and stop Biden from engaging Obama's horrendous nuclear deal. So this is just part of the picture to understand the complex reality of leading Israel, to finesse diplomacy, and be able to say no once in a while to a U.S. president. And protect the one and only Jewish state of Israel in the most dangerous part of the world, where too many powers are always doing everything they can to chip away at Israel in order to eventually destroy us.
Pulse of Israel, frontline videos from the Holy Land. Support our work by donating today.